Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm Nick Zulovich of Cherokee Media Group. Grateful for each of you taking time for our session titled Driving Efficiencies Through Technology, Repossession Strategy Possibilities, featuring Heather Ford, Patella Masatwani, and Stephen Paulson of MBSi. Before we get into our presentation, just a couple of quick things to mention. We are recording this webinar, so keep tabs of your inbox for a message containing a link so you can watch it again and share it with your colleagues. We encourage questions, so please use the functionality here on Zoom to share your questions, and we'll get to them after the presentation. So that's more than enough for me for right now. Let's get to our trio of experts from MBSi for our featured presentation. Heather Ford, let's begin with you.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks you guys for joining today. We're happy to have you. We don't need to stare at my photo too long here, but I'm the head of product and marketing at MBSi. And we set up this webinar to really cover a lot of different technology possibilities. But I wanted to cover quickly what we do. So we have a flagship product called Recovery Connect, where we connect the lender with all their service providers to keep everything in sync to manage repossessions. But we're not here to go into sales pitch and dive deep into our technology. We want to talk to you as a SaaS company. So why are we here today? We are really going to talk through different levels of communication, how to address and look at technology. And one thing that I'm responsible for as head of product is to keep a pulse on the market. And so to keep a pulse on the market, I really have to keep the lines of communication open. So what you see on the screen here are just a few of the issues that we hear all the time in the market. So everything from maxed out storage slots to complicated invoicing processes and wrongful repossessions. And we have different technologies in place that help mitigate these issues, but we wouldn't have been able to do that without keeping those lines of communication open with our customers. So really the key for us is to prioritize that communication with our team, with our cross-functional team. And if I've ever had the pleasure of chatting with you, you'll hear me say, I don't repo cars for a living. I work for a technology company. So it's really important for me to sit down with you and understand what your problems are. But standing in your shoes, you may be looking at technology as this really vast landscape, right? There's tons of tools and possibilities. Navigating it can be really tough. This is where that communication becomes our compass and how you can guide through that terrain. So partnering with technology companies like MBSi or any of the vendors that maybe you have developed relationships with today can help you take what seems to be a really complicated landscape and turn it into a treasure map, helping guide you through that. So, I mean, consider this. You may have one of the most powerful pieces of technology in your toolbox today. Maybe it's a vendor that you work with, maybe it's your existing platform, but there's a likelihood that you're just touching the tip of that iceberg. And so by partnering with your technology company, by developing a strong communication strategy, you can help them understand what problems you're facing so that they can identify how you can solve those with technology. And really, it's just what's going to turn that really complicated landscape into that map and that guide. And as we all know, technology is evolving rapidly, so rapidly. I don't want to say the magic two-letter word that everybody is familiar with, but you're hearing it all the time. 10 years ago, 8 years ago, it was big data, big data, big data. Now you have everything new, and it's a constant landscape. It's constantly changing. And if you are building technology, if you're working for a company that utilizes technology, it's hard to keep a pulse on what's happening. So, and ultimately, I mean, this happens to us even at MBSi, but those days, the weeks, they slip through. And if you don't have some sort of regular cadence of communication, it can be really tough to keep a pulse on everything. But at MBSi, what it kind of looks like for us is we keep those lines open with our customers. So we meet monthly, quarterly, sometimes even more frequently. We try to not make it a formalized meeting all the time. Sometimes it's picking up the phone. If you have the luxury, have an opportunity to attend industry conferences, it's a great way to see what's happening in the technology landscape today. But I would encourage you to keep the line of communication open with your vendors. And what that really means is expressing what your problems are. So if you have team members, people on your team, people that report to you or you report to, if you're experiencing time-consuming processes, there's likely some technology out there that can help you. You should also be looking for real-time data. Get as close to real-time as you can. That's going to really help keep things flowing really well. I know in our space, in the auto finance space, a lot of lenders in particular are on older tech stacks. They feel constrained by the tech stack, that they can't grow or they can't advance the technology. Bring that up to your vendors. There might be opportunities that you aren't aware of that they can help pull in and help you really grow in technology and solve some different process problems that maybe you aren't even thinking about. And ultimately, it's that feedback loop and developing those relationships. One thing we've done on our side is the real-time data is a really key piece to our tech stack and how we deliver technology. So anyway, that's why we bring it up as something to chat about. But after you identify your problem and you've been talking about it, now you have to make decisions on how you go forward, right? How do you want to innovate? And so with that, I'll hand it over to Steve.
Hello, my name is Stephen Paulson. I am the VP of Customer Delivery. That puts me in charge of, well, I call it dancing between kind of product and technology. So I get to take what Heather's team comes up with, not only help deliver it, but also support it as it gets out in the real world, which is really important as we talk about communication, which Heather did really well on. We hear that both from the support standpoint and going into the field. So it's merging everything together. As we move into innovation, I think it says innovation and automation, but really automation is innovation, right? So when we think about information, we think about our innovation, we think about technology, we think about processes, we think about disruptors like AI. You also have your widgets. What we're going to focus on here would be, obviously, we're a SaaS company, so we're going to go through some technology and process. I want to start by just going over some of the basics of what's out there right now. Now, we all think of innovation and we think of disruptors, right? A disruptor is something that changes how everybody thinks and works and acts. 3D printing, to me, it's not probably a big one, but it was just really cool. Whoever thought you could actually print something physical, right? Not just on a piece of paper, but physical. You think about Amazon. Amazon Prime changed the way people shop, right? Amazon Alexa, and I muted mine, so it wouldn't go off, so sorry if yours just did. But it changes the way. Who'd have thought 10 years ago that you could actually ask a device to order you paper towels and it would happen, right? These kind of disruptors I call the holy grail, right? They don't come around all the time. And if you're trying to create a disruptor, you have to start somewhere. And some of them are great ideas that just happen, but most great ideas come from a lot of hard work. So we'll get into kind of a process to thinking of innovation here in a second. Now we talk about base technologies, right? A lot of what we talk about today is speed, 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 speed. Speed solves every problem. At least that's what they keep telling me. One of the ways you can do that is with on-demand technology. Microservices is kind of the new thing that's going on. What it allows you to do is to think about a wagon, an old day wagon, covered wagon crossing the plain. Now imagine if you had a magic horse train. And every time you went up a hill, horses would just magically appear and help you get up the hill. And every time you went down a hill, the horses would just disappear down to where you had just one and you were going down the hill. Now, the great part about this kind of technology is that's what microservices do. That's what on-demand processing does for you. It allows you to create things that can then spin up as demand increases and then reduce as demand decreases. There's two great things about on-demand services. One, you only pay for processing that you use. So when you're like us, we're very busy during the day. Lots of lenders, lots of people logging on the website. So during the day, we have more demand and we need more power. At night, we don't have so much demand, right? Still have a little bit there, so we reduce that. And also reduces our footprint, which again saves cost. So now you're not only increasing speed, but saving cost. Another thing you can think about is real-time data. Everybody wants everything real-time now. Everybody's been there, right? You go to a website and you go to click, and it doesn't happen like in the split second these days. And you're like, click, 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 right? By the way, that makes us technologists really frustrated, just letting you know. But real-time data, think about, when I want to think about real-time data, I want you to think about your unconscious, right? So what you can do is there are services out there like SnapLogic, AWS Glue, NiFi, Kafka. These things monitor things in the background. So you think about real-time services and capabilities like your unconscious. So your unconscious mind is constantly over and over doing things without you actually even thinking about it. So when you go up the stairs, if the stairs are steep, your hand grabs the rail. You don't have to think to yourself, I want to grab that rail. Your mind just realized you're going upstairs, it might be a little shaky or it might have been a little steep, and you just reached out and grabbed the rail. There are so many other things you could go through that your mind does. Now there's these services out there will actually monitor your systems and your data externally. So they're sitting there and in real time, they're monitoring them externally. And what this allows you to do is create external triggers that not only can speed up delivery. So one of those things that we have in our systems is that we have real-time on-hook. And what it allows us to do is whether the agent is in the field and the lender is at their desk on the website, the first person that clicks that button is going to win. And that button will actually, in real time, within a split second, transfer that status change from the mobile to the web to the server to the API to whoever needs it. And that is all done through this kind of service. Lastly, you've got integrations with technology. Integrations create innovations. I'm just going to tell you, the more integrations you can have, the more data you have, the more data you have, the more you have available for you to work with. And then you have the operational. That's the stuff we all think about when we think about ways to improve and speed things up. A lot of operational processes deal with technology as well. So your job is to reduce the process of the human, right? You want to reduce clicks, you want to remove swivel chair, you want to create simple and actionable things for the users who are working in your systems to do. And today there's a lot of information available. So what you have to be careful of is more isn't always better. So don't information overload your users. Simple and actionable. The next thing we want to talk about is, there's some examples, but how do I do it? Well, processes happen every day. You have things going around you all the time. And a lot of times the ways to improve what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and the way to innovate starts with just the basics that you look over every day. I want you to think about it, peanut butter and jelly. And somewhere on this slide, there was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that Amanda put on there, and I laughed and we kept it. So, but I want you to think about peanut butter and jelly. The peanut butter and jelly is like the most basic thing. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine, right? It was developed in 1901. I know more about it now than I ever did because I put it on my slide and now it's become something I had to research. So sorry, it's how I work. But there was no innovation on it, right? And then in 1968, Schmuckers decided to come out with Goober, right? Where they mix the stripes of the peanut butter and jelly. And now you can do it in one swoop. Nobody needed to change it. If I'd have walked to my mom when I was a kid and said, hey, is there a way to improve that peanut butter and jelly? She probably would have given it to my brother and told me to go away, right? Then in 1983, the squeeze bottle was invented, right? So this is somebody else's innovation. But Smuckers took it and made squeezable jelly. So now you've got a new innovation of squeezable jelly, right? That came from a plain old peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Then you think it's over, right? And then it's what my kids consider peanut butter and jelly, which I never would have thought, which is an Uncrustable. I know it's Smuckers. I know I'm not pushing Smuckers. It didn't start with Smuckers. Smuckers bought them, so just bear with them. But in 1995, Uncrustable was born. And now my kids eat a frozen peanut butter and jelly sandwich with no crust, cut off, out of a freezer. This is how simple innovation can work. It's a basic thing. And I know if you'd have asked somebody, what was wrong with peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Nothing. It's just 2 pieces of bread, peanut butter and jelly. So now you've got to get into the right frame of mind, right? When you're doing innovation, it's all about how you're thinking and how you're doing it. And everybody says, think outside the box, think outside the box. Well, you do have to think outside the box because you have to be outside the norm. But you also have to get inside the box. People don't like change. When you ask somebody, they're going to tell you the same thing you've heard over. I've heard it a million times when I'm out there trying to talk to people and communicate, because it's important. I'm not telling you not to go interview. I'm not telling you not to go ask questions. That is the start. That is the start of everything you need. But you also have to know that what they're going to tell you is, it's how I've always done it before. It just works. There's really nothing to improve. It's all good. I like it. It's great. Those don't help you. What helps you is getting inside the box, right? Now you have to do it. You or somebody has to go roll up their sleeves with an outside the box mentality and go do whatever it is you're trying to improve. You want innovation? Go feel the pain, right? Go feel the pain by doing it yourself. And I guarantee you will find ways to streamline processes, to add technology, to go, what if I just had this, right? And I can tell you, I'm going to do it myself in about 2 weeks, because I'm heading out to go right along with some repo agents and put our software in their truck and watch them use it. And then I'm going to feel the pain, and I'm going to feel the successes, and I'm going to take a ton of notes, and I'm going to walk away from that experience and build a better product. And that's what we are going to do. The other thing is, forget what you know, right? When you're doing these things, you should be just taking tons of notes. That's every time I've ever approached something that I had to improve, I had to find a way to innovate, to increase speed, increase processes. It's about understanding what's there, understanding what I can do, what my end goal is, and then forget everything else I know. Just forget it, right? Just start taking notes. How do I want to get from point A to point B? In the ideal world, right? Imagine, if you would, if you could get there X, right? And so as you take all those notes, what you're going to do is you'll come out of that and you'll find ways in there to add little things. So I want you to think about Amazon Alexa, right? I'm going to say it over and over again, not to irritate you. So if you want to go turn it off right now, you might want to. But it came out 10 years ago, and it was a little Echo device. And actually the one behind me is the first generation. And it had voice recognition technology in it, right? So it would recognize your voice, and it had a few simple commands. Nothing as crazy as it has today. And what they did is they took that simple innovation and they then added onto it, right? They added things to it. They started bringing in and collaborating with other things to trigger innovation. So now when I ask it for paper towels, it will actually order them, charge my card, and they'll be at my door in 2 days. That is that point where we talked about all these services that we just talked about, the technologies that will talk to each other. Those are things that can trigger off of one another. Now, Patella is going to get into all the new sexy disruptor stuff with artificial intelligence, but that's something you have to think about as well, because artificial intelligence is coming. Now, what is there to gain, right? Well, we all know what there's to gain. I'll go over them, but it's not rocket science. You can increase your profits, you can reduce your expenses, you can improve quality, improve your throughput. Obviously, you can win customers. All of this is the stuff that we're doing this for. We're trying to improve and innovate our technologies for. I also want to warn you, and I call about the positive negatives or the gains and you lose, right? I'm going to think back to the first time that I was in charge of innovating something, right? I went from being the guy running around in the data center to somebody who had to innovate a product. So I sat down, I worked for a company called newspaperarchive.com. And I sat down with what we called key fielders at the time, and Newspaper Archive scanned images from the old days and they provided them to Ancestry, right? Well, Ancestry came in and bought 200,000 a month. We could only do 20,000 a month. So the CEO charged me with, hey, you got 3 months to get me from 20,000 to 200,000 without adding that many staff. So I went through. Long story short, I went in the box, thinking outside the box for a week, taking tons of notes, doing a job that I would never do if you paid me. And when I come out the other end, I was tickled as pink. We had our new product. We tested it. It was working. It was amazing. I walked in and sat at the CEO's desk and I said, great news. We can now produce 1.5 million images a month. And he was like, wow, that is amazing. I haven't sold 1.5 million images a month. I've only sold 200,000. So I need you to lay off half your staff. That is where you have to start thinking about. It impacts people, right? And sometimes we know that, and sometimes that's a part of what we're after. Now, there's a little sunshine there. I asked for 2 weeks and went out with the VP of sales, and we sold like 4 more, so we didn't have to let a bunch of people go. But it was something in my mind that I will never forget, because I sat down after doing something that I thought was the most amazing thing in the world and felt like somebody had kicked me between the legs. So don't forget the human factor when you do this. The other one is that when you increase technology, you have to think of the end-to-end process. So if you're focused on one piece and you're like, oh, wow, we found this way to speed it up. Great. Be careful when you deploy it, because if you sped one thing up, you have to make sure the next thing in the chain can handle it. So if you go innovate this piece of technology and you deploy it live without thinking through the end-to-end process, you will end up breaking something, and often you'll find yourself in a lot more pain than what you were before you deployed it. Last thing I'll touch upon is bleeding edge versus cutting edge. I always think it is what it sounds like, right? The bleeding edge means you are on this thing just came out. You are going to be the first person to take it live. You better make sure you have the risk appetite to do so, because the bleeding edge is called a bleeding edge because it hurts a lot. Cutting edge is a lot better. It's been out there, it's been proven, it's been tested a few times. It is newer. It's not tried and true, but that is the safer way for you to go to stay on that. I would let something go out personally 6 months to a year before I jumped on the bandwagon, to make sure that there were other people using it. Let somebody else cut their teeth on that technology before you adapt it into your infrastructure. Prove that it works, and then adopt it and take advantage of it, and let them serve the pain. That's what I tell her. Let somebody else have all the pain, and then you can enjoy the fruits of their labor. All right. Changing market dynamics. So things change a lot. We talked about disruptors, and AI is the number one right now, and Patella's going to go over that. And disruptors are one piece of a changing market. The other one is the actual market, right? And if you go back to the experience we had over the last few years with COVID, we had that same, everybody experienced it, but it was interesting for us because we're dealing with the problem right now that I'm not going to say, I'm sure you may have saw it coming. I didn't. And so before COVID, we had a lot of agents. We had agents covering the United States, and there was a lot of great agents. COVID hits, banks stop repos reduce, the government steps in and starts subsidizing everybody, and half of our agent network gone. COVID comes back, they're gone. So post-COVID, now we're coming out of it, and now we're at a point where delinquencies are on the rise, more cars are being repossessed than ever before, and we don't have as many agents. And we saw that part coming, so don't get me wrong. Everybody saw the fact that delinquencies on the rise and we don't have enough agents. What I think a lot of us missed was we don't have enough lot space, because with all those agents gone, there's not enough lots to store all the cars that are being repossessed. So the same company that had plenty of storage before, it now doesn't have any storage. And the crazy part about that is now they're actually choosing who to recover for based on how fast your car gets off their lot. So if you think about that, one of our biggest things, and one of the industry's biggest things right now, is how do we get cars off the lot faster? And we are definitely working on that. And a lot of that has to do with what Heather talked about, right? When you're trying to deal with changing market dynamics, innovation is great and it will help solve, but it's going to require communication. And I think if we all would have done better at communicating in the beginning, we might not have been as surprised as the lot space. All right, now not real quick, sorry. I'm never quick, as you can tell, I talked a lot longer than Heather, sorry. But overview of automation. So how do I do it? How do I create an automated system? Well, again, I'm going to use Alexa, and then I'll go over one that we did. But you start with a basic workflow system, right? Basic. It's just, it goes back to coding 101. I mean, I'll point my age. I took Fortran, my first college coding course, and it's horrible, but it does have an if and a then. So when you're creating an automated workflow system, you're really creating a set of rules, the if, and a set of responses or a schedule, a then. So you decide that Alexa says, hey, if you say buy paper towels today, then I want my background system, all the technology that's monitoring that voice and that text that comes out of it, to go ahead and trigger to identify the paper towels that I buy, charge my credit card, and send it to my door. And that is the basics of workflow automation. It's an if and a then. So you got to think about what are the rules that I'm going to create that if that rule is identified, will then follow this automated pattern. Now that's step one. The fun part is you can then do continuous improvements, right? And I won't go through all the ones that Alexa has done, but I can go through what we've done. So we have a similar automation process. It's called assignment automation. And right now you have a set of rules. I have a 2024 Toyota Corolla, and that's the rule. Okay. And it's in Texas. Okay. This in Texas now says, I want to go assign it to these vendors. And so it'll then go and assign it to the vendors, and then it'll manage that flow throughout its life cycle. That's a basic if-then statement, right? Rules, schedules. Now you take it to the next level, which is where we're headed, which is now I can complement that system with external data, right? And this is where everything starts to get really crazy. So now I go take and I say, okay, now I'm going to go find out how well my vendors perform. I'm going to go find out how fast they can get the cars off the lot. I'm going to go find out how long before they submit their condition report, all the things that are important to me. And then we'll do a bunch of analysis, and then we can shift your whole then statement based on those third-party conditions, right? And the list can go on. Anything you can think of can start to trigger, and that's what takes this basic rule schedule into an automated, powerful workflow like the Amazon Alexa that we use every day. See, I said it again. And there are other things, right? You can use lien loss. You can use AI, right? So imagine the AI, which is Tella's about to go into. You see the transition? I'm working on it. It wouldn't go so well, but AI is another indicator where you could take a basic system like the workflow system we have. You could integrate some AI with it, have it start asking its own questions, and then making decisions about the best thing for it to do. And nobody had to do anything. So with further ado, I'll turn you over to the smartest man in the room, Patella Mosatwani.
Thanks, Steve. Since I'm the last one to actually present, I'll try and fly through this. But before I go on, my name is Patella Mosatwani. I'm CTO at MBSi. Been with MBSi about 5.5 years, same as Steve. Started actually the same week. But I think there's a couple of things that I would like to sort of summarize from what we've heard from Heather and Steve before jumping in. One was communication from Heather. Important to communicate across the board and ensure that everybody's on the same page, which in actuality speaks a little bit about ensuring transparency about everything, whether it's actually the product, it's actually the service, or it's projects that you're actually undertaking with the actual customer. Important to actually have open communication. Steve went into innovation, and part of that innovation is driving exactly what he's talking about, doing things faster, more profitably, but actually in an actionable way, and so in a way that's going to be beneficial to your customers. So with that, I think we can go into a little bit about AI. Now, instead of actually speaking about AI in the typical ways that you'll hear about all the possible things that AI can do and what they will bring, I think it's actually important, not knowing all the audience, but I thought it's important for us to touch a little bit about the challenges with AI. And the reason why I think this is important is because it's not going to be a typical conversation. It's not going to be the same way as everybody touches on it. But I think it touches on some of the difficulties if you or the organizations you're dealing with are actually, touching or going into this area, and you're seeing it happen, and sometimes you're not sure what's going to come out of the other side. I think it's important to touch on a little bit about the challenges that are there with everybody. So AI deals a lot with having data to train models so that you could, in a almost a predictive way, be able to come up with outputs on the other side. So important to AI is the input of data. And data could be either in text format, which is what a lot of data is out there, or it could be in video format, it could be in image format, it could be whatever we're talking about. But there is an input of information that AI needs to be able to get trained and actually be able to make decisions. Now, why is collection of data a challenge? It's a challenge because traditionally, what we deem as collection of data is potentially just certain data elements. But truly speaking, in the AI world, when we can process tons and tons of data with big GPUs and machines, it's important that we actually be able to think about data as almost anything. Almost any of the elements that actually are available to be collected are in some shape or form useful in informing a decision that needs to be made somewhere else. And so what organizations struggle with is that collection of tons and tons of data, especially if that data either is useful but collected by somebody else, or you don't have the ways to collect the data today and it actually goes untapped. So that's number one. The second one is infrastructure. The infrastructure to process that tons and tons of data, either to store it, either to analyze it, either to build models on top of it. There's a lot of infrastructure that's required to be able to process all that data and make decisions. So that's the second part. The third part, and one that's really big in the industry that we all are in, because we all know that especially if you are in anything related to banking, it's important that your security is top-notch. And so as you can imagine, there's nobody who's really building their own, LLMs. You're probably taking an LLM from somewhere, and then you're actually using or training that LLM to have the outputs using your data. And in order for you to do that, you have to ensure that your security is top-notch. I think if you would take nothing else from this slide, that's the one element that I think everybody ought to take away from here is data privacy is absolutely big. You gotta ensure there's no data misuse. A lot of the stuff that you're actually using, you gotta encrypt, especially when you're getting data from outside, and especially when you're not running the GPUs yourselves. You have to actually ensure that data security is top-notch. Talent. I don't know that there's anybody out there who can tell you that they have this one solved. Things are changing so fast that getting talented individuals across all the spectrums that we talked about, both collection of data, infrastructure, as well as security, these individuals come at a cost because they are few and far between. So technical resources, analysts, scientists, all the people who work with large amounts of data to try and get actionable insights out of it, a lot of them, whether it's at the technical level or it's at the actual analysis level, they are absolutely, sought after. So it's important if you can grab hold of one to keep it. And then cost. I mean, resources are very, very, taxed in something, especially this new. Over time, when there's multiple competitors out there, probably the costs are going to go down as things become more efficient, but there's a lot of cost related to this kind of innovation. And so getting the capital to be invested into this innovation is something else that organizations actually see as a challenge. And then AI deployment into production and figuring out ways to integrate it with your product. So it's a challenge to figure out how do we not only integrate it with our product, especially because things have to be somewhat real time. In what way are we going to do that? What is the screen going to look like? Is the user even going to feel the integration with this AI tool? How are we going to lay it out? And then obviously at a scale, performance. We all know when ChatGPT came out, you would ask it a question and it would tell you to wait a while because its resources are tapped. And so making sure that the performance and scalability of this is deployed correctly and it can actually maintain the demands of a production environment. And then monitoring hallucinations. We all have heard about AI hallucinating. It has a lot to do with the type of data that it's getting inputted in. So it's important to watch out for those kind of things and have a way of actually correcting those results. And then lastly, and I think this is the biggest one, especially in the organization, is if you take AI and you ask it a question and then an answer comes out, especially if it's some calculation that a human mind cannot fathom, how do you explain what just happened? How do you give transparency to your stakeholders that the answer is actually the right one, especially if it's processing tons and tons of data to come out with an output? And so a lot of work is going into making sure that we can trust the output of the model and that we can actually pivot if we're getting results that are less than ideal. Can we go to the next one? All right, so this is not just something that I say is a problem. So for example, Snowflake, and I'm sure a ton of us know what Snowflake is, they also speak about what are the business challenges and technology challenges when it comes to sort of AI. Trust and compliance is one thing that we talked about, which is security, data quality, and privacy. Very, very big. Total cost of ownership, again, cost. Many projects of what you're trying to do, the cost of the infrastructure, the cost of the actual resources and skills. Proliferation of IT. Shadow IT, I don't know if everybody understands, but there's a lot of options for you to go with. And so which LLMs are you going to go with? Which ones are you going to leave on the table? Are your business users going to buy one off the shelf and not even tell you as an organization? I don't know how many people here are aware of, services that you can buy just using a credit card instead of actually inking something. Those are the kind of things that organizations have to look out for, especially if they feel like technology is not outputting or the IT teams are not outputting things as fast as they'd want. They'd have this problem where business users just go and buy their own stuff out there. And then what we have is on the technology side, you have data silos. Again, the ability to bring in data into a collective place where analysis can happen with all that data that you need to analyze. Infrastructure ops, as we've talked about, is the actual infrastructure and the integration maintenance that you have to do depending on what it is that you're going to integrate these services with. And then internal and third-party AI app governance. How do you ensure that the governance of your AI applications is actually top-notch? You have to implement something to ensure that AI products are not just bought over the shelf, especially given the security issues we've talked about and the concerns of ensuring that you actually have good governance and compliance over these apps. Next slide. I'm going to run through these ones quite a bit. From an architecture perspective, I think we touched on it, so I'm going to speed through this. We touched on the left-hand side, tons of data sources. You have to bring those into a secure environment that you can do all these analysis and actually come out with a good output. So you have to have some sort of data pipeline to bring all these data sources and all these different places from their different silos, all this data from the different silos into a common place in the middle where you would do a lot of the analysis. But then you also have to run your own sort of AI workloads. So where are you going to run those AI workloads? We all know about traditional analytics at the bottom there. That's traditional analytics. But you also then want to decide, do I build my own environment or do I use an already existing AI platform? And some of these are decisions that actually have to be made by the IT teams, taking into consideration all the challenges we've talked about, and then deciding what is the right thing to do. And you don't have to necessarily have one answer, but you got to be careful of proliferation of these apps. Going down to the next one. I thought I would end with a couple of examples. It's hard sometimes when people talk AI to imagine what really we're talking about. And this is just a sample. It's not limited to this. But there's a couple of examples of AI that are really interesting in a business context. So one, for example, is a summarize function. So a lot of products out here in LLMs have the ability to summarize information. So for example, if you have a 10-minute call between a customer services agent and a customer, and they have a discussion, you can actually summarize lengthy customer calls into consumable summaries and then grab the important components out of there, including sentiment at the end of the call from the customer, to be able to analyze that in a little bit more of a better way. Now imagine you took that and you actually combined it with a translate function where your customer services agents could be speaking English, Spanish, a whole host of different languages. You would translate those into one common language and then summarize them as well. So which means that that gives you a very good ability to actually put everything into a common view so that you can then collate and gather insights out of that. Image data extraction is a big one. I don't know if you guys have actually seen GPT-4o. GPT-4o is actually taking quite a few of these and actually combining them. If you've seen videos and what they're doing with that, they're actually taking a translate function where you can actually have translation. They're doing audio to text and text to audio as well, but also adding the image and video side of things where the AI can actually take information out of either an image or video and actually be able to tell you what it sees or interpret what it sees, whether you're happy, whether you're sad, and a whole host of things in your background. And that, I think, opens up a world of different things. So if you can imagine taking a few of these and actually being able to combine them together, this actually ends up being very, very powerful. So in summary, I think we're all in a very interesting time. Things are transitioning, but please be careful when taking these innovations into account. Be careful. Security is important. And that's what we at MBSi focus fundamentally on, is ensuring that security is absolutely paramount. And with that, I think we will go to questions.
Excellent presentation by our trio of experts from MBSi for our session titled Driving Efficiencies Through Technology, Repossession Strategy Possibilities. And if you do have a question for Heather, Patella, or Stephen, just use the functionality here on Zoom and we'll get to them in the time that we have remaining. And just to facilitate a conversation here, Patella, we'll continue with you, and you addressed it to a degree, but especially maybe even perhaps within the auto finance and repossession spaces, with the speed that AI can have and develops. What areas do you see being impacted sooner rather than later, perhaps even immediately? Where do you see AI being leveraged most within these particular spaces?
I think if you can go just one slide back, I think there are multiple things that could actually be of very good use to the repossession space. I would imagine if we were able to do the translate the audio to text as well as image data extraction. If you think about what we do, which is actually going to actually repossess the car, it is highly likely that obviously we don't want to meet anyone, but imagine if in the case we did meet somebody and we needed to talk to that person and there was a language issue, if you had a way to be able to do an audio to text, translate what the other person's saying, and be able to communicate, it probably would reduce the amount of hostility that you might find out in the field. That's number one. Number two, imagine you don't have to necessarily be filling out a form anymore. And you could actually do some things with images that the actual AI can extract information out of an image and then be able to have a pre-filled form because of that. I mean, I think those are the kind of things that I see sort of infiltrating what we do, including forecasting and anomaly detection. So for example, in terms of forecasting, you can imagine what we could do with forecasting and actually predicting what might happen in the future. So being able to, for example, recommend a service provider in a situation where their service might be best suited for a certain service that you need to do. I mean, these are all things that we could do, which would allow us to be able to adopt this technology into our Ford. But all of that with a high degree of security, I always say. So caution when adopting these things to ensure that you do whatever it takes to ensure that security comes first.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Patella. And Stephen, we'll turn back to you and revisit a little bit of what you had shared. Just again, how can finance companies stay ahead of those technological advancements and still maintain a competitive edge in the market? How can they proceed prudently, so to speak?
You're on mute, bud.
Sorry about that.
Sure, it was
But
really good.
yeah, I'm going to lean a little bit on Heather and a little bit on technology because one of them is communication, right? It's understanding and talking to all the people in the industry, all the people that you're trying to, in the area you're looking at. And then the other one is integration, complementary services, complementary data. You have something, it's that ability to complement what you have with something new. And that's really how you really start to create powerful technologies that work for the industry. And the other thing I will caution is more isn't always better, and it has to be simple and actionable for the people who are using it, because you can really overload people thinking you're giving them a ton of data. I mean, if you're in our industry and if there's agents or forwarders or even lenders listening, if you talk to an agent about getting addresses, the worst thing you can do is send them a case with 10 addresses, because that tells them that you don't know where the car is. So taking some information and complementing that data to say, hey, these 6 are probably not something I want to send to you. And then sending them 4 is going to improve your service greatly. So it's just simple stuff like that.
Closing moments here during our webinar titled Driving Efficiencies Through Technology, Repossession Strategy Possibilities, with our trio of executives from MBSi, Heather Ford, Patella Masatwani, and Stephen Paulson. And you can learn more about what MBSi can do within the repossession space by going to their company website at MBSicorp.com. Again, that's MBSicorp.com to find out more about their products and services. And Heather Ford, you began our session, so let's give you the opportunity to wrap us up. Just again, what opportunities might be available associated with adopting new technologies, especially in the repossession space and its operations? Just how can shops take advantage of what might be available?
Oh gosh, there's so much out there, right? I mean, we just attended a conference a couple of weeks ago, and there's always new technology. We, as a SaaS company, we're releasing new technology, but you also have additional entrants to the market. So I think, I touched a little on this, but I think when we get into the day-to-day grind of what we're doing, it just seems like this is the way to do it always. Like, I'm always going to start my day in whatever process, or if I'm going to send a message to somebody, I'm gonna always send it this way. And I think we look at it as it's just the way to do it because it's the way we've always done it. I would invite you to think more broadly about what that process looks like. So, I mean, Steve brought up a lot of the Amazon Alexa examples where, used to, you would go to the store to buy paper towels, or you would actually get on Amazon. Now you can say it. I know a lot of repo agencies, even today, like communication, I think they used to have a ton of group chats. Now they've implemented Slack and Slack channels. Like, there's tons of different ways to communicate, and it can be really daunting because there's so many options out there. You may say, oh, go to Google, type in a search, help me figure out a better way to blank. And then you get an endless number of possibilities. So start with people ask what they're doing, start with your vendors that you're already working with, and see kind of best practices.
That's Heather Ford, Patella Masatwani, and Stephen Paulson with MBSi for our session driving efficiencies through technology, repossession strategies, and possibilities. Thank you to each of you for sharing your great perspectives and expertise as the industry continues to evolve. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
And on behalf of all of us at Cherokee Media Group, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you again next time.